It was time to give this plant-based thing a try. But there was only one meat-free meal I could think of.
Hi, what can I get for you today?
Could I get 2 bean burritos, please?
Bean or beef?
Bean.
All right, I'll see you at the window, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I went plant-based, I thought that it would be a longer transition, but I just immediately started feeling and not need the recovery in between. It was mind-blowing to my teammates. They were tired of me saying, like, let's go again and again. Recovery is the most essential element of an elite athlete's existence. It's damage repair, and you do that over and over again. Because if you can do more work and more repair, you're gonna be the better athlete.
Dotsie was right. Bouncing back quickly between workouts is a huge advantage for any athlete. But the idea that food could be the secret weapon, I had to find out more. Dr. Scott Stoll is a former Olympian and a team physician for the USA Olympic team.
I work with professional athletes that are very interested in protein. Protein's important, but which package is your protein coming in is the better question to answer. The plant-based protein versus the animal protein, which package is going to help the body overcome inflammation and help the body to recover? In animal products, you're getting protein packaged with inflammatory molecules like Nu-5GC, endotoxins, and heme iron. When we consume animal products, it also changes the microbiome, the bacteria that live in our gut. And the bacterial species that have been shown to promote inflammation overgrow and begin to produce inflammatory mediators like TMAO.
The study that showed that a single hamburger impairs blood flow also showed that it can increase measures of inflammation by 70%. In the arteries, inflammation reduces blood flow. In muscles and joints, it can increase soreness and delay recovery.
In plant-based protein, you're getting protein that's packaged with antioxidants, phytochemicals, minerals, and vitamins that are going to reduce inflammation, optimize the microbiome, optimize blood supply, and optimize your body's performance.
The antioxidants Dr. Stoll was talking about are found almost entirely in plants, which have, on average, 64 times the antioxidant content of animal foods. Even iceberg lettuce has more antioxidants than salmon or eggs. As a result, switching to a plant-based diet can help reduce measures of inflammation by 29% in just 3 weeks.
I was about ready to retire, as I should have been, because I'm like 35 at that time. But I just kept getting better, and so they had to take me to the Olympics. We were complete underdogs as Team USA. In our semifinal ride against Australia, we were down by 1.7 seconds. No one's ever come back in team pursuit from a deficit that large. And we beat them on the line by 8/100ths of a second. I was 39 and a half years old when I stood on the Olympic podium. I'm still the oldest person, male or female, to even go to the Olympic Games in my event. My diet was the most powerful aspect to me being able to perform and produce for the US team at the Olympic Games.
All of these athletes and their stories were impressive, but my goal from the beginning was to recover from actual injuries, like the damage I'd done to my knees.
And he's down at the line of scrimmage in the arms of Derek Morgan.
Derek Morgan had been on a similar journey.
In the NFL, the injury rate is 100%. It's a violent game.
Hit hard and goes down there.
And so how you respond to injury and how quickly you heal from injury is important, because if you're not on the field, you're not helping the team. I was reading the research and seeing that a plant-based diet could be beneficial specifically for recovery. And so I started incorporating it and I started seeing really good results with it. I was recovering better. I wasn't getting as sore. I was a lot less swollen. Basically, to confirm what I was feeling, I got my blood tested. 6 months after being on the diet, all of my markers were down, my blood pressure, my cholesterol. But the main thing I was looking at was the inflammation marker in your blood, and mine was almost obsolete. It wasn't there anymore.
Whole food plant-based diet is going to optimize the growth of blood vessels into damaged tissue. It's going to lay down new tissue in tendons and muscles. It's going to stimulate their immune system to fight off infections. So almost at every level, eating the right foods is going to accelerate the healing process.
6 weeks into my personal plant-based experiment, I went to the gym to see if I could notice a difference. I wasn't able to spar or wrestle yet, so I decided to hit the battling ropes. At my gym, lasting 10 minutes on the ropes gets your name on the wall. Only a few people had ever hit 20 minutes. Even at the peak of my conditioning, the most I'd ever got was 8 minutes.
James, keep it going.
But on this day, I hit 10 minutes easily. Then I hit 20, 30.
You're at 45 minutes.
I went past the hour mark by about 1 minute and just thought, all right, that'll do.
I can't believe you just did that, man.
The only thing that had changed was my diet.
I could have kept going. That's clear off the record, right?
Yeah. Freaking hour.
When I was growing up, the toughest guy in the world to me was my dad. He taught me the value of self-defense and was always there to help me when I got into trouble. But now, he was the one who needed help.
So you had a heart attack?
Correct.
Had you had much in the way of symptoms prior to this episode?
No, never before.
After my dad got out of the hospital following emergency heart surgery, we got on a Skype call with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, an internationally renowned heart disease researcher from the Cleveland Clinic.
Always been, I think, very fit. So somewhat of a surprise.
Well, no, not a surprise. In all of Western civilization, there is nothing more common than coronary artery heart disease. And that is because of the foods that most people eat every day.
In all of our studies, we found the same thing. These same biological mechanisms that affect performance also affect our health. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and endothelial function.
When you eat animal products, you start to form plaques in the coronary arteries. Plaque formation in the arteries doesn't just limit the function of the arteries, it can also block the blood flow, and that's when the heart starts to have some real problems keeping up with the demands of the body. When you eat animal products, you start to form plaques in the coronary arteries. Plaque formation in the arteries doesn't just limit the function of the arteries, it can also block the blood flow, and that's when the heart starts to have some real problems keeping up with the demands of the body.
In terms of heart disease, oftentimes there's confusion. People think that, well, I don't eat red meat, so I'm okay. We know that it's more complicated than that. It's not just red meat. It's not just the fat.
For nearly 50 years, we were told that the primary cause of heart disease was saturated fat and cholesterol, and that leaner meats, lower fat dairy products, and egg whites were the solution. But the research now shows that the other inflammatory compounds in animal foods, like those that can impair athletic recovery, also play a significant role in the development of heart disease.
We're going to do a whole lot better by just getting rid of the animal products. And there are really good biochemical reasons for that. Heme iron is one of them, for example.
Heme iron is from an animal source, right? So most commonly you think red meat, even though poultry have it, fish has it. They did a meta-analysis looking over 6 prospective dietary studies, over 130,000 patients, and they came to the conclusion that 1 milligram a day of heme iron is associated with a 27% increasing risk of coronary heart disease. To put that in perspective, an average hamburger patty has about 2 to 3 milligrams. Heme iron is from an animal source, right? So most commonly you think red meat, even though poultry have it, fish has it. They did a meta-analysis looking over 6 prospective dietary studies, over 130,000 patients, and they came to the conclusion that 1 milligram a day of heme iron is associated with a 27% increasing risk of coronary heart disease. To put that in perspective, an average hamburger patty has about 2 to 3 milligrams.
And it isn't just the iron in animal foods that can cause problems. It's actually the animal protein itself.
It's not just red meat, not just chicken, not just eggs, not just milk. It's the ingestion of any animal protein. At that moment in time, a process begins at a chemical level inside the body.
When the protein found in animal foods is cooked, preserved, or even just digested by our gut bacteria, highly inflammatory compounds are formed that corrode our cardiovascular system. This helps explain why people who get all of their protein from plants reduce their risk of heart disease by 55%. It would also help explain why the only diet that has ever been shown to actually reverse heart disease is a plant-based one.
What we found is that in the first month, there was improvement in blood flow and the heart began to pump blood more normally. After a year, even severely clogged coronary arteries became measurably less clogged, and even more improvement after 5 years. But in the randomized control group, who were doing just what their doctors told them to do at the time, less red meat, more fish and chicken, little exercise and so on, their arteries got more clogged after 1 year and even more clogged after 5 years.
While all of this sounded promising, my dad didn't just need to get better. He needed to get better fast. The stents in his heart were only a temporary solution. He could have another heart attack at any moment. I found some hope at a firehouse in Brooklyn, where Dr. Esselstyn's son Rip, a former firefighter and professional triathlete, was launching some of New York's bravest on a powerful new program.
What's the #1 killer of firefighters in the line of duty? Heart attacks. 67% of firefighters who perish from the line of duty die of heart attacks. So this right here, that is what we call a healthy artery. The blood can flow through this huge opening here, and this is what happens after decades on the meat and dairy diet. Okay? If you guys have been eating this way, I want you to take the 7-day rescue challenge. We bought you guys plant-based groceries. I want you to give yourselves the chance to see what your internal biochemistry does in just 7 days.
I know my cholesterol's elevated, my LDLs are always very high.
The same job that I was doing like 10 years ago without an effort, without taking an effort.
Despite working out all week, playing sports, my cholesterol's high and growing by about 10, 15 points every year for the last 5 or 6 years. I realized a couple salads a week, it doesn't really cut it.
I got 2 kids, so hopefully I'll feel better, have more energy, and add some years to my life.
I went to see if I could get my dad to make these same changes to his diet as soon as possible.
Well, what are you suggesting?
Well, let's do the shopping.
Tomatoes, cucumber, we have hummus dips.
But my dad can be a little stubborn,
Soya yogurt, and that's about it, I think.
so I wasn't feeling that hopeful.
We'll just drink tea.
I come from a town called Melton Mowbray, known in England as the rural capital of food. It's the home of Stilton cheese and the world-famous Melton Mowbray pork pie. The pace of change here is very slow. And my dad, like most of us, is a product of where he grew up. I just couldn't imagine someone as set in his ways as my father making such a big switch.
On the top there, worth another 20 quid. Here's 50 quid a lot.
Until I got home and went back to the gym.
Push me. Oh, here.
I've spent years working out with Lucius Smith. He was a cornerback in the NFL, has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and was my strength and conditioning coach.
That's it. More arms, more arms.
I told Lou about the research I'd been doing and what happened to my dad. And he'd never mentioned this before, and he said, I've been on a plant-based diet for almost 10 years. Lou is 60 years old, not far off my father's age.
Most guys my age can't keep up with their grandchildren. My grandchildren can't keep up with me. When I went from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet, my blood pressure went down to like 110/70. My heart rate, sometimes it's been under 50, like 48, 47. I'm more focused, I'm more relaxed, and I noticed that I have a lot more energy because of the plant-based diet. Come on, man, come on. People in their 20s, they come in here. We do a workout. I sustain the workout a lot easier than they do. We can come in here and do 800. Listen to what I just said. 800 kettlebell swings and snatches in one workout. They can't make it. I'm not kidding you. They can't hang, man, I'm telling you. They can't hang.
There was another guy my dad's age who had also made a big change.
I ate a lot of meat. I ate my 10, 15 eggs a day. And, I had my 250 grams of protein a day because I weighed 250 pounds.
One and only Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But as I got older and as I started reading up on it, I recognized the fact that you really don't have to get your protein from meat or from animals, as far as that goes. So we started going more in a direction of a vegetarian kind of a diet. Now we're doing it the right way, with the right spices. All of a sudden, I love it much more than the meat. And, the cholesterol went down to around 109. It was the lowest that it ever was in my entire life, at almost 69.
What we eat has a major impact on our health and our well-being in every way we can measure. People who eat a diet that's high in animal protein have a 75% increased risk of premature death from all causes, and a 400% to 500% increased risk of death from most forms of cancer, prostate, breast, colon cancer, as well as type 2 diabetes. What we eat has a major impact on our health and our well-being in every way we can measure. People who eat a diet that's high in animal protein have a 75% increased risk of premature death from all causes, and a 400% to 500% increased risk of death from most forms of cancer, prostate, breast, colon cancer, as well as type 2 diabetes.
The amino acids that come from animal sources tend to make our cells rev up and multiply faster. For example, there is accumulating evidence that high consumption of proteins from dairy sources is related to a higher risk of prostate cancer. That chain of cancer causation actually seems pretty clear.
Cancer has been linked to other animal foods as well. Research funded by the National Cancer Institute found that vegetarians who add 1 or more servings per week of white meat like chicken or fish more than triple their risk of colon cancer.
So it's not one set of dietary guidelines for improving your performance as an athlete, another one for reversing heart disease, a different one for reversing diabetes, a different one for reversing prostate cancer. It's the same for all of them.
As groundbreaking as all of this nutritional science was, I also found it really confusing. How could meat be so bad for us if that's what our ancestors were supposedly built to eat?
When we think about the diet of early humans, we're often drawn to thinking about meat, but plant foods were more important than the archaeological record gives credit for. The food that could be relied on wherever you were was the plant food.
The popular perception of what early humans ate dates back to the 1930s and 1940s, when there was some amazing finds of early human ancestors. Animal bones and tools that very much look like they may have been used to butcher and maim those animals. So very early on, we had this notion that meat had a disproportionately larger role in the diet of early human ancestors than it actually did.
The bias in the archaeological record toward stone and bone preservation over things like plants has led to a very skewed view. If we look at deep time, bones and stone tools preserve very well, but plants decay very rapidly. What's exciting, though, is in the last decade, we've started to realize microscopic fossils of plants do preserve quite well. And so we're revisiting some of these earlier Paleolithic sites and finding abundant evidence of plants.
Advanced technologies, like those used to analyze the gladiator bones, have allowed scientists to take a closer look at the tools, bones, and teeth of our ancestors, leading to the discovery that early humans ate mostly plants. And the reason for this is actually quite simple.
Humans do not have any specialized genetic, anatomical, or physiological adaptations to meat consumption. By contrast, we have many adaptations to plant consumption. We have longer digestive tracts than do carnivores, and this allows humans to digest plants and fibers that require longer processing time. We also lack the ability to produce our own vitamin C. Vitamin C is found in plants, so the fact that we cannot make our own indicates just how reliant upon plants we actually are. This is why we have trichromatic vision. This is very different from carnivores, which have dichromatic vision. We can see more colors, and this is very important, especially if you need to find fresh, ripe fruit.
We have a brain that just is desperate for glucose. It's such a fussy organ. That's the only thing it really takes in for energy. Well, meat's not a very good source of glucose. To have a big brain like this, you need to eat something different. And the most efficient way to get glucose is to eat carbohydrates.
But what about our teeth? Aren't they proof that we're built to eat meat?
In primates, you might think canine teeth are associated with a diet of meat, but they're not. In gorillas, when males want to intimidate other males, they will show the length of their formidable canines. On the other hand, carnivores have distinctive teeth, and they're shaped like scissor blades. They simply shred the meat off and they swallow. Compare that to the teeth of a human being, square and low cusped for crushing and grinding tough plant tissues. Right there in your own mouth is the best evidence we have for a diet that could not have been meat.
If you just got placed in some ancestral environment, the best thing you could be equipped with is not a very sharp spear. The most important thing you could be equipped with is knowledge of which plants you can eat.
Suddenly it all made sense. The reason an animal-based diet isn't good for us is because our bodies aren't built for it. It's simply the wrong type of fuel. The only thing that didn't really fit was B12, an important vitamin that everyone kept warning me you could only get from animal foods. It turns out that B12 isn't made by animals after all. It's made by bacteria that these animals consume in the soil and water. Just like with protein, animals are only the middlemen. Before industrial farming, farm animals and humans could get B12 by eating traces of dirt on plant foods or by drinking water from rivers or streams. But now, because pesticides, antibiotics, and chlorine kill the bacteria that produce this vitamin, even farm animals have to be given B12 supplements. And up to 39% of people tested, including meat eaters, are low in B12. As a result, the best way for humans to get enough B12, whether they eat animal foods or not, is simply to take a supplement. The only thing that didn't really fit was B12, an important vitamin that everyone kept warning me you could only get from animal foods. It turns out that B12 isn't made by animals after all. It's made by bacteria that these animals consume in the soil and water. Just like with protein, animals are only the middlemen. Before industrial farming, farm animals and humans could get B12 by eating traces of dirt on plant foods or by drinking water from rivers or streams. But now, because pesticides, antibiotics, and chlorine kill the bacteria that produce this vitamin, even farm animals have to be given B12 supplements. And up to 39% of people tested, including meat eaters, are low in B12. As a result, the best way for humans to get enough B12, whether they eat animal foods or not, is simply to take a supplement. When I caught up with Scott a full month into his 2,200-mile trek, he had fallen well behind record pace.
Not even a week into the journey, I developed a quadricep tear. I had to start thinking, okay, how am I going to get through this? There are no rest days when you're setting a speed record on the Appalachian Trail. I needed to recover while I was still pushing my body to the brink, waking up the next day and the next day after that and doing the same thing. I really had to trust in my training and trust in my nutrition to help me get up each morning at 4:30 and put another 50 miles in.
With only 12 days left to break the record, Scott still had 550 miles left to go.
They were experiencing record rainfall in Vermont when I went through, and there's just no way that I could be prepared for it. I was trying to make up all the ground that I'd lost with the injury, trying to get back on record pace, getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep or less, night after night after night, going over some of the most remote stretches. I put in 26 hours straight. But the Appalachian Trail keeps throwing more and more mountains at you. It never really lets up. And by the time I actually got to New Hampshire, the White Mountains just obliterated me.
With less than 2 weeks remaining, Patrick continued training for his world record attempt to carry more weight than anyone in history.
I started lifting weights when I was 14 years old because I was kind of wimpy and small in that time. And I wanted to be some kind of hero, able to help if something happened. This is my mom and dad. When I was 4 years old, my dad, my mom, and my little sister, she was 6 months old, they were in a car accident. And only my mom survived the accident. So when I was young, I had these fantasies of being super strong, and if someone got trapped, being able to help them get out.
For any guy watching that day, it wasn't just a car Patrick had crushed. It was a myth they'd been fed their entire lives.
Steak. That's what a man eats. Made from stuff guys need. Eat like a man, man.
There's no one that can relate to that better than I do because I've lived in that world. Steak is for man.
Go meat!
They showed us commercials, burgers, George Foreman with the grill.
Yeah.
And the big sandwiches and all that stuff.
Eat like a man and be full like a man.
This is great, great marketing by the meat industry.
Serious man food.
Selling that idea that real men eat meat.
You look like more of a man with a quarter-pounder in your hand.
But you got to understand, that's marketing. That's not based on reality.
Okay, I'm going to take you down to the exam room. When I think of a manly man, I think of somebody who has strength, endurance, sexual prowess, and fertility. And in fact, what the scientific studies are showing is that the more meat men eat, the more quickly they lose their manly manhood.
The blood test with the Miami Dolphins measured how a single meal could affect blood flow throughout the entire body. I asked Dr. Spitz if he could conduct an experiment with 3 collegiate athletes, but this time on a more specific part of the male anatomy.
So, here's a model of a penis.
Dr. Spitz is the lead delegate of urology for the American Medical Association. When it comes to the penis, he literally wrote the book.
Now, you're going to be putting this device on yourself. One ring goes on the base of the penis, and the other ring goes on at the tip of the penis, just behind the head of the penis. It knows how tight to squeeze to know when an erection is starting, because when it squeezes, it'll determine, oh, it's now of a larger circumference, something's happening. What we're going to look at is what effect the meal you have has on your erections that night, and you're going to be eating 2 different kinds of meals. For this study, on the first night, we gave the guys burritos that had meat. Beef, chicken, pork, but really high-quality meats, grass-fed, organic. On the second night, we gave them very similar burritos, but we swapped out the animal portions for plant-based protein.
It's really good. I thought this was gonna be nasty, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think we were gonna eat a burrito, I thought we were gonna get a salad.
This study is going to take advantage of a natural function that occurs in men when they sleep. Men's bodies create erections, and this occurs throughout the night while the subject is asleep. Once an erection happens, this device can sense it, and a printout is generated of how firm the erection was, how long it lasted, and how many of them there were, to see if we can see a physical effect on erections as a result of what they just ate for dinner. This is where we take a look at the results. So Mason, I'm going to give you your results first. Let you take those out. Okay. The bigger the circumference, the harder the erection. And so you'll notice that that first circle, which is the meat meal, is not as big a circle, it's not as hard an erection as that second circle, the vegan meal. Now let's look at the second sheet. The second sheet is a accumulation of how many erections and for how long you had over the course of the night. So that first stubby graph is really, it's not the size of your penis.
I'm struggling.
It's not the size of your penis, it's how many minutes throughout the night you had erections.
Wow.
Blake, let's take a look at your results.
Oh, no.
Okay?
Hold composure.
And look, again, like Mason, you were more erect after the plant-based diet than the meat-based diet. Okay, how about how often you had erections? Wow. That's almost a 500% difference.
Dang, man. That's crazy.
Blake, you ready for yours? All right, here you go. You had about a 13% change in the hardness of your erections. Okay, let's look at how many or how long you had erections for.
Bro. Show it, dang it.
Yeah, don't hold out. Oh.
Bro, that's an hour, bro.
So you guys all had a very similar response to the meat meal versus the plant meal.
That's crazy. Yeah, growing up, and if I saw some big dude at a restaurant eating a big old steak, and so I'm like, oh, I need to be like that. And then like I see like a guy ordering a salad off the menu, I'm like,
he's soft, right?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that guy,
Yeah,
what is
he's
he
soft.
doing? But really, at the end of the night, the guy eating the big steak is soft, and then the other guy is a heart.
So when you take your date out on Valentine's Day, where are you going to take them to eat?
To the veggie grill, son.
Okay, the veggie grill. Now, this is not a scientifically validated study, but the results that we're seeing are very exciting. I think this is going to wake a lot of people up. I think it's going to wake up people who have penises, and I think it's going to wake up people who like people who have penises.
I've never eaten a piece of meat in my entire life. And I've never had an issue with testosterone. I've gotten blood tests, and all my levels are right where they need to be. And clearly, I don't have any trouble building muscle.
Studies comparing men who eat animal foods with men who don't have consistently demonstrated no difference in testosterone levels. I found this hard to believe, since plant-based diets often include soy products, which I'd always been told were loaded with estrogen.
I post a lot of my food, and if it includes any type of soy products, out of 100 comments, you've got 20 to 30 of them saying, hey, well, I heard that soy raises estrogen levels. Well, that's not the case.
Soy, it turns out, contains phytoestrogens, compounds that look like estrogens but can actually have the opposite effect, blocking some of our body's estrogen receptors and preventing real dietary sources of estrogen from taking hold. The foods that contain real estrogens are animal foods like chicken, eggs, and dairy, which can have a significant impact on our hormone levels. Simply drinking cow's milk can increase a man's estrogen levels by 26% in just 1 hour, while dropping their testosterone levels by 18%. Another hormone strongly connected to diet is cortisol, a stress hormone linked to reduced muscle mass and increased body fat. Research has shown that people who replace animal foods with high-carbohydrate plant foods experience an average drop in cortisol levels of 27%. Soy, it turns out, contains phytoestrogens, compounds that look like estrogens but can actually have the opposite effect, blocking some of our body's estrogen receptors and preventing real dietary sources of estrogen from taking hold. The foods that contain real estrogens are animal foods like chicken, eggs, and dairy, which can have a significant impact on our hormone levels. Simply drinking cow's milk can increase a man's estrogen levels by 26% in just 1 hour, while dropping their testosterone levels by 18%. Another hormone strongly connected to diet is cortisol, a stress hormone linked to reduced muscle mass and increased body fat. Research has shown that people who replace animal foods with high-carbohydrate plant foods experience an average drop in cortisol levels of 27%.
This is what I always heard, like, you can't go lean, you can't go shredded vegan because you have so much carbs. But I'm standing here in the best shape of my life, easy.
I already knew that processed carbs, like white flour and sugar, can lead to weight gain. But what I didn't realize is that unprocessed carbohydrates like oats, bananas, and sweet potatoes are associated with decreased body fat. An 8-week weight training trial also found that those consuming a normal amount of carbs gained 2.9 pounds of muscle mass, while those in the low-carb group actually lost muscle.
A typical bodybuilding diet is a very low-carb diet. So these guys that haven't had a carb in 2 weeks, they're walking around like zombies. I'm backstage eating all the carbs that I want. They're like, how are you eating that right now when you look this shredded?
Why didn't everyone know about this? And then I remembered my grandfather, who died of heart failure at the age of 63 after more than 4 decades of smoking. A paratrooper in World War II, he got hooked on cigarettes during a time when young people like him were being sold the idea that smoking was actually good for you.
Babe Ruth, idol of millions.
To sell this idea, the tobacco industry turned to famous athletes, the ultimate symbols of fitness and health.
After a game, Carl Furillo of the Dodgers looks for a mild cigarette, a Camel, of course.
But right around the time Babe Ruth died from throat cancer in his early 50s, the scientific evidence was starting to stack up, so a new marketing plan was required.
According to this nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
For years, the tobacco industry said that their cigarettes did not cause cancer. And they trotted out their own paid researchers to come out with statements to confuse the issue.
Despite their efforts, cigarette ads were eventually banned from sports broadcasting, just in time for another big industry to step up to the plate and start playing the same game.
What's in the bag? Big Mac? Play for it.
With a new generation of athletes, including me. But it wasn't long before the evidence against animal foods started stacking up as well.
Now that playbook is being used by the food industry.
She's from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
They're going to hire their so-called
I'm
experts
first of all a registered dietitian and nutrition scientist, and I'm a
to
mom.
create just enough confusion.
Are you saying with processed meat that it is not, in your view, carcinogenic?
I don't say that it supports a sufficient relationship.
And they make it seem as though there's doubt about what we're talking about.
This is not a link, a causal link between red and processed meat and any type of cancer.
But would you recommend reducing meat intake?
No, not at all.
How on earth is the viewer supposed to make sense of all of this?
With overwhelming scientific evidence connecting animal foods to many of the most common deadly diseases, I discovered that the meat, dairy, and egg industries have engaged in a covert response, funding studies that deny this evidence while burying their involvement in the fine print. One of the hired guns paid to conduct these studies is Exponent Incorporated, a company whose research was used by the tobacco industry to deny the connection between secondhand smoke and cancer. For more than 50 years, Exponent has generated studies that challenge the health risks of everything from asbestos, arsenic, and mercury to animal foods.
The formula works beautifully for people selling food. It works beautifully for people selling drugs to treat the diseases that bad food causes. And it works beautifully for the media, which can give us a new story about diet every day.
Here we go again.
New guidelines are muddled and confusing, and not by accident.
Eggs are in.
So happy about the eggs.
I know, I'm happy about the eggs.
Eating bacon is okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, butter.
Butter is back.
But despite the appearance in our media of confusion, there is massive global consensus about the fundamentals of a health-promoting diet, and it's a diet that every time, no matter whether it's high in fat or low in fat, higher in carbs, lower in carbs, in every population, every kind of research, it's a plant food predominant diet, every time.
Just when I thought I'd uncovered every dark secret of the animal foods industry, I got invited to train a paramilitary group in Zimbabwe with a special mission.
Okay, so just be very careful, guys. Stay on the rocks. Yeah. So these guys are now listed as critically endangered. There's only about 5,000 of them left on the planet. They're basically being hunted to extinction because of the value of their horn, around $40,000 a pound.
Damien Manda is a retired special operations sniper who completed 12 tours of duty in Iraq. He's also the founder of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation.
Poacher maybe have an axe or a knife, so trying to disarm them.
Yeah. So, he's going to thrust with the knife.
Yeah. We are the SEAL Team 6 of conservation. We're the guys that go in and stop the hemorrhaging. Okay. Yeah, I'll stick to my AK-47, you stick to that. I came to Africa because I was looking for the next 6-month adventure. I saw a bull elephant that had had its face cut off. Tusks that had been taken, the whole elephant sitting there dead because some guy wants to have a tusk on his desk.
What sort of ambush is this called? Linear ambush.
I had money and I had skills that could help these rangers.
Using the minimum amount of force required to get the job done.
And I made the choice to dedicate my life to helping these guys protect these animals. After making that choice, though, I started to realize that every day I was going out on patrol and protecting one animal and coming home at night and putting another animal on the fire. I created this flexible morality that was convenient for me, because if you don't eat meat, you're some sort of vegan that shrivels up into a string bean. In my mind, I justified it. There's enough cows on the planet, they're not going to go extinct. But the longer I thought about it, the more I started to accept what I already knew. The easiest way to protect other animals is just not to put them in your mouth. I just do the same things as these big grey things out here that we're trying to protect, elephant and rhino. I just stick to plants. The rangers that we support patrol 5 million acres of wilderness, protecting these endangered species. But the actual biggest threat we have is the meat industry and the land that they are continually taking away from what we have left of these natural wilderness areas. Inch by inch, yard by yard, mile by mile.
About 3/4 of all the agricultural land in the world is used for livestock production, and it imposes a huge cost on biodiversity. And what is the single biggest source of habitat destruction? It's the livestock sector.
Meat, dairy, egg, and fish farming use 83% of the world's farmland, yet provide only 18% of the world's calories. The reason livestock require so much land is because, once again, animals are just the middlemen, consuming, on average, 6 times more protein than they produce. With more than 70 billion animals consumed globally each year, growing animal feed requires vast amounts of land, making it one of the leading drivers of deforestation. It also requires huge amounts of water.
Meat plays a disproportionately large role in causing this overuse of fresh water. 25% of the rivers in the world no longer reach the ocean because we're taking out so much water to produce animal feed.
Water has been fed into the grain that's been fed to the cattle. The cattle's being made into beef. One hamburger is 2,400 liters of embedded water. That's a heck of a lot of water.
All told, more than a quarter of humanity's fresh water consumption goes to produce animal foods. And it's not just water depletion that's an issue, it's also water pollution. In the United States, for example, farm animals produce nearly 50 times more waste per year than its entire human population, polluting rivers, lakes, and groundwater all across the country.
The livestock sector is responsible for 15% of global man-made emissions. So to put that in perspective, that's about the same as all the emissions from all the forms of transport in the world, all the planes, trains, cars, vans, and ships, all added up.
Agriculture is not only the biggest culprit threatening the future for humanity on Earth, it is also the biggest and most important silver bullet to a solution.
In the US, where meat consumption is 3 times the global average, shifting away from an animal-based diet would reduce agricultural emissions by up to 73% and save 1 million liters of water per person per year. Globally, this shift would free up a total area of land the size of Africa, taking pressure off many of the world's most endangered ecosystems and species.
The message is overwhelming, both for public health and environmental reasons. The more plants you can eat and the less meat and dairy you can consume, the better.
After learning how much is at stake if we don't change the way we eat, I went back to Brooklyn to find some hope.
Did you do it right the whole 7 days?
Yeah, the entire time.
You did?
Yeah.
Good for you.
After eating a meal, I didn't feel like, oh, I gotta go find a couch to sit on or lay down, like that. I actually felt energized and I could jump on the bicycle or go on the treadmill or something.
Or fight a fire.
So I was down 11.
11 pounds?
Yeah.
Your cholesterol was 262.
Right.
All right? Which is elevated, much higher than we want to be. Today, 176.
Wow. Almost 100 points, huh?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.
On your blood pressure, you dropped 16
Wow, that's
on your
really
systolic and 2 on your diastolic, so you're now 130/82 as opposed to 146/84. Fantastic. A little bump there.
Yeah.
Your cholesterol was 276. I mean, you know that that's super elevated, right?
Yeah, they were freaking out.
They were freaking out.
At the doctor's office.
You know what? They should be freaking out now because today it was 169.
Whoa, now you're talking. 169.
You dropped 107 points, my man.
That's amazing.
Here's what we got. After 7 days, the cholesterol average drop was 21 points. The average weight loss was 6.12 pounds. You guys, instead of having arteries that looked like this here, right? You guys are on the road to having arteries that look like this here. And we know that the #1 killer of in the line of duty firefighters is heart attacks. This is a food-created disease, and you guys don't have to be another statistic.
My doctor wanted to put me on a statin, and I kind of looked at it like that was like cheating, like an easy way out, and there has to be a healthier, more long-term alternative. And then when this opportunity presented itself, I took it.
When you eat a healthy, whole foods, plant-based diet, it changes the expression of your genes. It turns on the good genes, turns off the bad genes. Your genes are a predisposition, but your genes are not your fate. And even if your mother and your father and aunts and uncles all died of diabetes, cancer, even heart disease, it doesn't mean that you need to.
Once I get to here, I'm going to come up and I'm gonna drop my head on his face. With help from my new diet, I've fully recovered from my injuries and am back to teaching self-defense. Or I can chop here and start down here. But with a critical new component, internal defense. You can get improved blood flow that allows more oxygen, more nutrients to the muscles. And it's not just the athletes. Armed with the truth in nutrition, I now have the tools to help protect more lives than ever before.
It's good. Yeah.
How are you feeling now?
Very good. The figure that I read, it was 85% likelihood of your first attack, and that kills you. That's a high percentage, which makes me feel very blessed.
Happy birthday, dear Pops. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. We've gone down the vegan route, and we now have soya milk. Masha makes sure I have my vegetables. Insists on it now.
How old are you?
71.
71.
Glad to be here.
What's up? What's good with you?
Bruce Lee understood that the quest for truth is only useful if you're prepared to take action on what you find.
It's best to lead by example. Most people say, oh, I just can't become vegan. I said, you're right, it's a process to it.
I'm gonna give you guys some vegan chocolates.
People have this idea in their head that if they're going to do something, it's an all or nothing approach, and that's not the case at all.
But if you explain it, say, hey, why don't you try once a week? Just chill it with the meat. 50 years ago, no one talked about, hey, maybe you should just get your protein from vegetables. But now, there's many, many athletes, professional athletes in all kinds of different sports that have done extremely well staying away from animal foods.
Lewis Hamilton wins the German Grand Prix!
We all want to feel great. We all want to look great, have more energy. And the most important thing is about having the right fuel in your body. I can't remember feeling this great in my whole 32 years of my life.
At the 20, cuts back at the 15, and Matthews goes! Opening play, touchdown for the Titans! And I don't ever remember a comeback like this. This is unreal.
This was our best season in the last 15 years.
Sack, that was Orakpo and Derek Morgan.
And we had about 14 guys on plant-based diets.
Jarrell Casey, Brian Orakpo.
Bright spot in this game was this Titans defense.
Oh my goodness!
Double-digit sacks for Derek Morgan. He had his best season of his career.
Titans on their way to the playoffs. We did it, baby!
And the playoff win on my birthday was probably the pinnacle of my career so far.
Everybody's talked about the defensive line in this diet.
It was the burritos. It was the breakfast burritos. That's what it was. That'll get you to the playoffs.
By the time Scott reached Mount Katahdin, word of his perseverance was bringing people out in droves. But after 46 days and nearly 2,200 miles, Scott had only a few hours left to break the record.
This will be the heaviest weight that anyone has ever carried on their shoulders. Patrick will be attempting 555 kilos, which is 1,224 pounds. This is an official Guinness World Record.
The potential of the human body is immense. You can come out of some of the deepest, darkest holes if you keep pressing forward.
I'm gonna do this.
Woo! Here we go! World record in time!
Scott Jurek is one of the world's most accomplished ultra-marathoners. His latest quest, the Appalachian Trail. It takes most hikers 5 to 7 months. Jurek did it in 46 days, 8 hours, and 7 minutes. 3 hours faster than the previous record.
It's not about being the strongest and the biggest. It's really about what are you going to do with your strength and what are you going to do with the power that you have.